Forgiveness is the bridge you have to cross between separation and reconciliation. Now, if you think that the bridge of forgiveness is something that is difficult to cross, not crossing it is a lot harder. And I want to show you by telling you about a story that you're probably familiar with that is in the Bible. And the story is that story of the unforgiven servant. And as the story goes, there's this particular servant that owed his master about 10,000 talents. If you don't know what 10,000 talents is, one talent itself, if you're taking a look at the conservative estimate, is about 100 denarii. And if you don't know what 100 denarii is, then, one denarii is kind of like a day's wages. So in about a year, if you take away all the holidays and every single thing else like that, somebody would earn about 300 denarii, which represent about 3 talents. That means for this servant to have paid back his debt in the most conservative estimation of what 10,000 talents is, it would have taken him a minimum of about 33 or 33 and a half years just to pay it off. In the maximum estimation, it would have taken him about 200,000 years if it was like a talent of silver or gold or something like that, because that one talent is about 6,000 denarii. So if you consider that, right, this servant owed the master a debt that he could not pay off. And the master had a choice at this point in time. The master could ask him to pay it off, or the master could have compassion on him and forgive him. And the Bible says that the master had compassion on this servant and forgave that servant the 10,000 talents that he was owed. Now, that is very important in the sense that before the master forgave the servant, the master had to have compassion. And what you need to know is that if you have a heart of compassion, you will find it a little bit easier to forgive. But if you don't have a heart of compassion, it's going to be a little bit harder to forgive. But think about this. Before the master forgave the servant, the master had in mind to just put the servant and his family into servitude. But would that have done anything anyway? Right? Even if the master had done that and put his entire family into servitude, they still wouldn't have been able to pay off the 10,000 talents that was owed. That's the key thing. So if you're going to decide that you're not going to forgive, right, and you're going to make somebody just, kind of pay off their debt, so to speak, right, then what you're really asking them to do is for them to go and pay back something that they cannot pay back anyway. So, for example, if somebody is doing you some wrong and you're holding on to it, they can never go back and undo that thing. So ultimately, they will continue to work, right? They won't be able to pay you back, and you're not paid back anyway because you don't feel good, because they can never pay you back. It never stops or removes what they did. So you're not satisfied, they're not satisfied. So if you decide that you're not going to cross that bridge of forgiveness, really what you're saying is that you're going to maintain a separation. I know forgiveness is hard, but I'm just trying to explain why it is important for you to actually take the step to do that. So when I talk about the servant, you can see that he would not have been satisfied even if, the master would not have been satisfied even if the servant had continued doing every single thing that he was supposed to do, and the servant would never have been able to pay off the debt. So that makes the unforgiveness, not really worthwhile then, because it wouldn't have satisfied anybody. Now, as the story goes, that same servant, after he was forgiven because the master had a heart of compassion, had another servant that owed him some money, and that servant owed him only 100 days worth of wages, or 100 denarii. So that servant could actually have paid that off. But here's the thing. Because the first servant did not have a heart of compassion, he decided to throw that other servant in prison. Now, you may say, well, it serves the other servant right in the sense that, well, he owed the first servant something. But guess what? By throwing that other servant in prison, the first servant actually made sure that there was no way it could have been paid back. That's what happens when you're not forgiving, right? Or you don't go through the process of forgiving somebody. What you actually do is that you throw them into a prison because maybe you wall yourself off, and then the intimacy is lost and connection is lost and all of that kind of stuff is lost. But at the end of the day, the person can't even try to make amends, right? And so when you don't forgive somebody, you might still be in the relationship, you may still be living together, but ultimately the person is never able to make amends because you've thrown them into the prison of emotional solitude, or you've walled them off, right? That's kind of what this servant did. Now, here's the thing again, even if you do that, doesn't mean that you've been paid back. Right? When that servant threw the other servant into prison and there was only 100 denarii, for only 100 denarii, that servant couldn't have paid him back. But at the same time, he was thinking about it, right? Because he knows he's been owed, right? So just because you throw somebody into that prison doesn't mean that you're going to feel any better, right? So not forgiving somebody doesn't actually make you feel any better because it doesn't accomplish anything for you. And now here's the third part. And the real folly of unforgiveness is this. That first servant that decided to throw the other servant into prison ended up being thrown into prison himself. And that's the final thing about unforgiveness and why you should move towards forgiveness for your relationship. When you decide that you're going to have an unforgiving heart, what happens is not just that you throw the other person into prison to try to work off something they can't even pay back now. You also end up throwing yourself into a prison. Now you're imprisoned by what that person has done, right? And the thing is, you cannot move on and you cannot have the life that you're meant to have. You cannot have the relationship that you're meant to have because you have now imprisoned yourself. Because ultimately, what you've done by not forgiving that person is that you cannot heal anymore, right? And if you're not able to heal anymore, and then the person's been thrown into prison, then really there's no going forward in that relationship. And that is the folly of unforgiveness. The other thing is this. Everybody owes somebody a debt, right? Maybe you owe somebody a debt of gratitude, or maybe you've done something off and you've been charged with doing something wrong or you've offended somebody. Everybody needs forgiveness because we're not perfect people. Right. And so it is something that we know, but it's something that is difficult to do. But what I'm trying to share with you is that if you hold on to unforgiveness, what it actually does is worse than forgiving in the first place. Because the moment you forgive somebody and you just let it go, right? Yes, maybe you've lost something and it takes you some time, but what you gain is a lot more, right? You don't imprison yourself, you don't imprison the other person, and you give the relationship a chance of coming back together, and you give the relationship a chance, a true reconciliation. Especially if you're married, I want you to consider this because there's no point going through your entire marriage, with a heart of unforgiveness. Always remembering what somebody did before, always bringing it back, right? And being in a relationship where although you're together, there's really no intimacy or connection because you always have your guard up, right? And it's almost as if two people are in prison, right? There's no point doing that, right? And it doesn't matter. You can say, okay, well, I'm just going to find somebody else. They're not going to be perfect either. And you will have to forgive that person anyway, right? If you have an unforgiving heart, at some point, the only thing you can do is actually stay where you are and not engage with another human being because unfortunately, human beings get it wrong. Now, I know it's easier to forgive when human beings or your spouse has gotten it wrong in an arena or in an area where you don't hurt as much, right? But here's the thing, you can't control that. And that's unfortunate. I wish you could, but you can't control that. You don't know where your spouse is going to get it wrong. You don't know really what's going to happen, right? It is better for you to take some kind of control of that situation and make sure that no matter what it is, right, that you have a heart for compassion for the person, right? And like that first master with the first servant, having a heart of compassion just means you have to take a look at the person and realize, the person can't do anything about this now, right? So holding them accountable is one thing, right? And saying, well, you need to go back. They can't go back in time. That's part of having a heart of compassion, right? It's about mercy at the end of the day. And mercy is not getting something that the person actually deserves, right? The person deserves to be punished, but mercy is saying, you know what? I'm just going to let you go. And remember, Jesus has had mercy on us as well. So we need to have mercy on our spouses and our partners. And that is super important. And so I just wanted to share this with you just as a little bit of a starter to let you know that, hey, look, if you are going to have a reconciled relationship, right, and you're not going to be separated either emotionally or physically or otherwise, you are going to have to go through forgiveness. And that only comes as you develop a heart of compassion, a heart that is based on showing mercy to somebody else, because you know as well that you require a lot of mercy. And you also know that if you don't do that, the alternative is much worse. So although forgiving that person may be tough for the sake of your relationship and what it does to you and that person, it is actually easier than not forgiving the person. See, that's why God told us we should go ahead and forgive the person even if it's 70 times 7 times, right? We ought to do that because the alternative is even worse. So, that's what I wanted to share. And I hope that you really got something from it and it helps you on your journey as you're looking to go through the process of forgiving one another. Thank you so much.